Hi, I'm Michael Bishop from OnGrid. This video, called
Mommy, what's an electric bill?
is about how utilities charge for electricity and how solar and other distributed resources can reduce that expense. So why watch this video? This is some good fundamental knowledge for anybody in the energy space, especially anyone who's directly engaged with people who want to reduce their bill, or if you'd like to reduce your own bill. So electricity pricing can seem pretty complicated. Fortunately, the two presenters today are very determined to turn the swamp into a meadow, to turn this lion into a kitty cat, to turn this...
We're done, Michael. We get it.
Right.
Anyway, presenters today are Fred Taylor Hochberg and Thomas Yu. Both were previously rate analysts at the nation's largest utility, PG&E. Fred is now with Watson, helping energy professionals get utility customer data without terrible frustration. Thomas is now doing something top secret in the energy storage space, which is another way of saying Thomas now works a register at McDonald's. Just kidding. This video exists because of OnGrid, serving up financial presentation software to solar professionals since 2005. Now let's get on with it. Here's Fred and Thomas.
Hi. Thanks, Michael. I'm Thomas,
And I'm Fred.
and we're here to talk about electric rates.
So I remember the first time I took a look at an electric bill, and I thought, wow, this is really confusing. There's all these weird units on there I didn't understand, and in general I had, just a hard time digesting it. But after a while, I learned about it, and I'm here to share that knowledge with you today.
So really, electric bills are just like going to the grocery store or any other bill you might pay. It's just quantity times price. So if you go to the grocery store and you buy like 2 pounds of mushrooms, say for $1.50 a pound, that's $3.
The first step in understanding how bills are calculated is understanding the quantities. So the structure of this talk is first we're going to get you guys to understand quantities and then move on to price. So in order to build up an understanding of quantity, let's start with a very fundamental unit called the watt.
So you might have been to the store and gotten light bulbs, and there are 60-watt light bulbs and 100-watt light bulbs. But what do the watts actually mean? Well, a watt is just the rate at which you use electricity.
Let's think about a 60-watt bulb, and let's say you run that 60-watt bulb for 4 hours. So to get the total energy consumed, you would multiply the 60 watts by the 4 hours. You get a total of 240 watt hours.
If instead of a 60-watt light bulb, you ran a 100-watt light bulb for 4 hours, you would use 400 watt hours, or 0.4 kilowatt hours. The important thing to remember is that your kilowatt hours or your watt hours, your energy, is just wattage times hours used.
So just remember watts and watt hours. The watts, the rate at which you use energy, and watt hours are the total energy used over a period of time. So now that we understand the basic units we're going to be talking about today, kilowatts and kilowatt hours, let's apply this knowledge and think of the place where you spend most of your time, the house. So let's say you wake up and at 7 a.m. You turn on the stove, your electric oven, and you turn on a light, and you turn on your coffee maker. And you'd have all of those things on at once. And let's say the stove draws 1,000 watts. Let's say that the coffee maker draws 500 watts, and let's say the light draws 100 watts. So the key thing to understand here is at 7 a.m., when these three devices are on simultaneously, those wattages, those loads, they stack. So your house will be using a total of 1,000 plus 500 plus 100 watts. That's 1.6 kilowatts at 7 a.m.
So now that we understand that load stacks, we need a way to graphically represent it. That takes the form of what we call a load curve. On the x-axis of the load curve is time, or time of day. On the y-axis of the load curve is just the total amount of wattage, or kilowatts, being drawn down by the house or the business.
So now that we understand the concept of a load curve, let's build up a sample one based on the house that I had mentioned earlier. Let's start at 12 a.m. So at this time, there's not a lot of devices or things that use electricity on. Maybe you have a heater cycling on and off. So at 7 a.m., you wake up, you turn your light on, you turn your stove on, you turn on the coffee maker, and so your load goes up, like I was talking about earlier. Then let's say you leave for work. And during the day, your load's pretty low because you're not home, you're not actively using anything. And then let's say you get home at 7 p.m. And at 7 p.m., you turn on more lights and your TV, what have you. So then you finally go to bed later. So this is your house's load curve over the course of a day.
Or what if instead you are a small business, like a coffee shop? At nighttime, you have like security cameras rolling and maybe like the refrigerator going, but not a whole lot of things going on. In the morning, you get in, you turn on your register, you turn on the lights, you start up your coffee maker, and you start processing customers. Throughout the day, it heats up, and you've got some air conditioning load going on. But it's more or less just constant business throughout the day. Then at the end of the day, you close up. You turn all your appliances off, and at night, you're just left with your refrigerator and your security cameras.
So now let's think of something bigger, like a factory. Say a factory that makes cars. So you have welding machines, you have heating and cooling, and you have lights and all that stuff. And you'll notice that with this curve, it's running pretty much 24/7. So the load curve is pretty constant. It kind of tends to hover around a certain point. Different groups of customers are charged different charge types depending on what they are. So for example, if you're a factory, you might have a complicated list of charges with a demand charge. If you're just a house, you may only have the energy charge and the customer charge. And if you're a small business, you may also have only a customer charge and an energy charge. So the set of charges that a given customer faces is called their rate schedule. Utilities have different types of rate schedules for different customers. So there's industrial rate schedules for the big factories, there's commercial schedules for grocery stores and whatnot, there's residential schedules for houses.
Keep in mind that a rate schedule is just a grouping of charge types. So there are three important properties of your load curve that the utility cares about for purposes of billing. The first of which is the height of the curve. This represents your kilowatt usage at any point in time.
The second property of the curve is kilowatt hours, which is equal to the area under the curve. It represents the total energy consumed over a certain period of time.
The third important property is just the existence of the curve. By using electricity at all, the utility will charge you.
So just as your load curve has three properties, utilities have three different types of charges to match each of these properties.
So the utility charges for the height of the curve using something called a demand charge. This charge is usually expressed in dollars per kW and is assessed to the highest point on your demand curve.
So for example, let's say you have a business who in a month hits a maximum kW of 100 kW. And let's say the utility charges you $1.25 per kW for that maximum. So you would pay $1.25 times 100 equals $125. So the second property of our load curve, which is area under the curve, is charged for using something called an energy charge, which is in units of dollars per kilowatt hour. If you look at your home's electric bill, you will probably see this on the bill. And let's say, for example, in a certain month you consumed 500 kilowatt hours and your energy rate was 10 cents per kilowatt hour. For that month, you'll owe 500 kilowatt hours times 10 cents per kilowatt hour equals $50.
The third property is the existence of the curve, and the utility charges for this using a customer charge. These are typically expressed in dollars per customer day or dollars per customer month. So if you were connected to the grid at all, and your customer charge was $5 a customer month, then if you were connected, you would just be charged $5 for that month of usage.
So how do these three charge types, energy charges, demand charges, and customer charges, translate into what is actually charged to customers on their bill? It depends on the type of customer. So different types of customers have different combinations of those three charges on their bill.
So let's say you're a small business customer. This example tariff just has 1, an energy charge, and 2, a customer charge. It charges 8 cents a kilowatt hour for energy and $20 as a customer charge.
So the rate that Thomas just mentioned charges for two things. Number one is the area under the curve, and number two is the fact that the curve exists. So let's say on top of those two charges, let's add another one, a demand charge of $1.25 per kW.
This rate schedule is typically applied to a slightly larger customer, say like a medium-sized business, and charges for 1, the area under the curve, 2, the existence of the curve, but now we're adding a charge for 3, the height of the curve. Another type of common rate schedule is time of use rates. To understand these rates, we need to look at usage in 3 different time of use periods: the on-peak, the part peak, and the off-peak. In this example, the on-peak period runs from noon to 6 p.m. The part peak period runs from 8 a.m. to noon, and then 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The off-peak period just happens in all the other hours. It charges 17 cents a kilowatt hour for the on-peak usage, 5 cents a kilowatt hour for the part peak usage, and 2 cents a kilowatt hour for the off-peak usage. Same as with the other rate schedules, there's a $20 customer charge.
This schedule charges for two things. Number one is the area under the curve, that's the energy charge, and number two is the fact that the curve exists, that's the customer charge. Note that the energy charge is different at different times of day. Finally, let's talk about tiered rate schedules. These are very common for residential customers. Basically, there are different prices for different levels of usage. So usage up to 11,000 kilowatt hours is charged out at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. The next 4,000 kilowatt hours after that are charged out at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. The next 8,000 kilowatt hours after that are charged at 9 cents a kilowatt hour. And finally, all the kilowatt hours beyond those I just mentioned are charged at 28 cents a kilowatt hour.
So that was all very confusing, but I suppose it still is just charging for 1, the area under the curve, and 2, the curve existing. Now, a word from our sponsors.
Finding a phone in a car isn't that unusual anymore, except when it leaves the car, for greener pastures, the high seas, or a leisurely lunch. Radio Shack keeps you in constant communication with their affordable, transportable cellular telephone.
Hello? Oh, yes, he's right here. It's for you.
Yes, I heard about the merger. Buy 100 shares.
The affordable, transportable cellular telephone, only at Radio Shack.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that message from our sponsor,
Radio Shack.
In this section, we're going to bill out a load curve under certain rate schedules. Now, we're going to be saying a lot of numbers, and you may be confused at first, but don't worry. Really, at the end of the day, all we're doing is multiplying the appropriate quantity times the appropriate price.
In order to make things easier to follow, we've color-coded the appropriate rates and the appropriate quantities.
So when we bill these out, we're going to be billing based on a single day. But, as you probably know, in practice, utility bills are rendered roughly once a month.
So let's bill out a single load curve under various different rate schedules. Here's the curve billed out under a rate schedule with only a flat energy charge and a customer charge. To bill this out, we take the area under the curve, which is shaded in blue, and has a total energy consumed of 24,000 kilowatt hours. The applicable energy rate is the blue shaded 8 cents per kilowatt hour. That gives us 24,000 kilowatt hours times 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which equals $2,000. This customer was also connected to the grid, so they pay a customer charge of $20. This customer pays $2,000 for energy and $20 for connection, for a total of $2,020.
What if this customer were a larger customer, say a medium-sized business, and had a demand charge on top of all this? The bill will be calculated in the same way as what we just discussed, except on top of the dollars already paid, we take the highest point on the curve, and we bill it out at a rate of $1.25 per max kW. So for example, let's say this place hits a maximum of 1,600 kW. We take this maximum kW and multiply it by the rate of $1.25 per kW to get $2,000. So now the total bill is the same $2,020 as before, plus an extra $2,000 for demand, for a total of $4,020.
Now let's see what would happen if a customer were billed on time of use charges. I like this one because we get to use a lot of pretty colors. Hooray! To calculate a time of use bill, we first need to find out how many total kilowatt hours the person used in each of the time of use periods. The blue area is the on-peak period, and it contains about 8,300 kilowatt hours. The red area represents the part-peak periods, and they contain about 7,400 kilowatt hours. The green areas are the usage in the off-peak periods, and they contain about 8,900 kilowatt hours. Then we bill them out on the applicable time of use rates we talked about earlier. To calculate the on-peak bill, we multiply 8,300 kilowatt hours by 17 cents a kilowatt hour to get $1,400. The part-peak charges are 7,400 kilowatt hours multiplied by 5 cents a kilowatt hour and total to $400. The off-peak charges are 8,900 kilowatt hours times 2 cents a kilowatt hour, which equals $200. Add all these together and our $20 customer charge for a total bill of $2,020.
Finally, here's a house being billed under the tiered rate structure. This blue area represents usage in Tier 1, Tier 2 usage is the red area, Tier 3 is the green area, and the purple area is Tier 4. Now let's multiply the tiered rates by the tiered usage. So the Tier 1 price of 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour times 11,000 kilowatt hours gives us $500. The Tier 2 price of 6 cents per kilowatt hour times 4,000 kilowatt hours in Tier 2 gives us $250. The Tier 3 price of 9 cents per kilowatt hour times 8,000 kilowatt hours in Tier 3 gives us $750. And finally, the Tier 4 price of 28 cents per kilowatt hour times 1,700 kilowatt hours in Tier 4 gives us $500. Add up all the tiered charges, throw on our $20 customer charge, and we have a bill of $2,020. So now that we know how a bill is calculated, let's talk bill savings. So we have all this usage and we want to reduce our bill. So how can we do that?
Keep in mind that you're charged for three things in various ways. You're charged for the area under the curve, the highest point on your load curve, and the curve existing. So now let's install an 1100 kilowatt solar system and see what happens to our bill.
The red area on the load curve shows the solar generation during the course of the day. The solar panels don't generate anything at night, but as the sun rises in the morning at 6:30 a.m., it starts to generate a little. As the day wears on, it produces more and more and peaks out at about its 1100 kW rating. The generation will dip whenever a cloud passes over, but generally the system produces during the day. In the evening, as the sun sets, the panels produce less and less, eventually going to zero at 6 p.m. Over the course of this day, the system generated about 6,000 kilowatt hours. The blue area now represents the energy we import from the grid, net of solar panel production. Here's how the bill looks after solar, under the flat energy rate schedule. Take the blue area under the curve and multiply it by the blue rate. Add on the customer charge and get a total bill of $1,500 or 25% bill savings.
If this customer were on the demand charge schedule, the same rates would be applied to the same kilowatt hours as from the flat energy bill, but we'd also need to lay on the $1.25 per kilowatt demand charge. Previously, the highest point was at 1 o'clock. Now there's a lot of solar production at that time, so the new highest point is at 4 o'clock. The customer's max demand has fallen, but not by the full 1,100 kilowatt capacity amount. Instead, the native load is still pretty high in the early evening. The peak demand has only fallen by 83 kilowatts. The new demand charge of the bill would be $1,900. Add this onto the bill that Fred just calculated, and you get a total bill of about $3,400, or 15% savings.
Now let's look at the time of use bill. Note what solar does to the way that electricity is used at different times. The off-peak usage drops by 2%, the part-peak usage drops by 37%, the on-peak usage drops by 41%. You'll notice that the reduction is bigger during the on and part-peak times because that is when the sun is shining. However, the off-peak period doesn't get much sunshine, so usage in that period is not changed very much. So, to get the bill, we multiply the green area by the green off-peak rate to get the off-peak bill. We multiply the red area by the red part-peak rate to get the part-peak bill. We multiply the blue area by the blue on-peak rate to get the on-peak bill. Add up the bills from the 3 periods, add the customer charge, and you've got the total bill at about $1,300 or a 36% savings.
Finally, let's consider what the bill savings would be on the tiered energy residential schedule. They reduced their total usage by 6,300 kilowatt hours. They've entirely eliminated their Tier 4 usage, which used to be in purple, and reduced their green Tier 3 usage down to 3,500 kilowatt hours. The blue Tier 1 and the red Tier 2 usage have remained unchanged. Multiply the colored areas by their respective rates and add the customer charge to get a bill of $1,100. They've managed to reduce their bill by a whopping 45%.
So what do we learn from all these savings calculations? Well, the value of solar really depends on what rate schedule the customer is on. Notice that customers that were on schedules that only charge for energy saved more than the customers who also charge for demand.
That's because solar isn't great at demand charge management. It produces a lot of energy and can reduce demand charges, but should it be cloudy on one day in a month, you won't see a lot of demand charge reduction.
In contrast, the TOU schedule had a lot of savings, and that's because solar really is producing during those expensive on-peak hours.
Hooray! Now you're a rates expert. Go forth and entertain and delight guests at your dinner parties with your knowledge of electric bills.
Thanks for your time. I'm Fred.
And I'm Thomas.
OnGrid gives huge thanks to presenters Thomas Yu and Fred Taylor Hochberg. Thomas and Fred put a lot into this video, and they did it all for the love of sharing energy knowledge. Big thanks also to video producer Jason Federley, who patiently spared us from our weird green screen ideas. Huge thanks to QuickMount PV for sharing their green screen studio. Michael is a fan of QuickMount PV both for their excellent solar roof mounts and for their super pro technical education. This video is brought to you by OnGrid. Check out ongrid.net for more free educational resources and to learn about OnGrid's financial presentation software for solar professionals. Michael, Thomas, and Fred welcome any feedback at mommy@ongrid.net.